We're diving into a series of disturbing documents today, discovered by a filing clerk in the records department of a correctional facility in a large southeast city. These documents, they contain the last words and testimonies of death row inmates, and they hint at something unsettling, a shared experience.
A glimpse behind the curtain, so to speak.
Exactly. We're talking about personal accounts, raw and unfiltered, offered by those facing their final moments.
It's a chilling collection.
It really is. The filing clerk had been working at the facility for about 10 months, archiving old execution records, preparing for a move to a new facility. And as they sifted through countless boxes, they came across one that stood out. It was filled with inmate statements and testimonies, going all the way back to 1977.
Decades of final words.
And within those statements, a pattern emerged, a chilling one. Inmates executed years apart described encounters with a mysterious individual, a figure that seemed to haunt their final days.
The details are truly the stuff of nightmares.
They described a being with shifting, almost fluid facial features. Imagine skin that tears and reforms right before your eyes. Black, oily substance dripping from the wounds.
Bulging yellow eyes, no eyelids, just staring relentlessly.
And a mouth filled with rows of rotted teeth.
Truly horrific.
One of the most detailed and disturbing accounts comes from an inmate named Turek, convicted of murder in the first degree in 1983 and executed in 1984. His statement, typed by his own hand, paints a terrifying picture of his encounters with this mysterious figure. And his story begins in a dream, a nightmare so vivid that it left him physically ill.
He describes standing at the end of a familiar street, the street where he grew up, but something was off. Freezing rain fell in a strange, otherworldly glow, and at the end of the street stood the figure.
The figure approached quickly, its face contorting, skin tearing and reforming, those bulging yellow eyes fixed on Chor's eyes. He found himself unable to move, unable to scream as the figure forced its way closer, forcing open its mouth filled with rotted teeth and began to vomit black and yellow pus into new Chor's.
Said he felt a sudden sense of recognition as if he knew this being. When he woke drenched in sweat, a name was on the tip of his tongue, a name he felt compelled to utter. Redacted.
But Beaker's encounters with this figure didn't end there. They moved from the realm of nightmares into his waking life. The next encounter occurred while Jimidi was on a smoke break at his job.
He described tasting sulfur, a sudden metallic tang on his tongue, seeing something move in the corner of his eye. As he tried to hurry back inside, he heard a sound, a sickening, crunching sound that he described as teeth grinding.
Finished his shift and rushed to his car in the parking lot. And there, sitting on the hood of his car, was the figure. The same shifting face, the same yellow eyes. This time tried to scream, but he found himself paralyzed, unable to breathe.
He collapsed to the ground, and as the figure slid off the car to stand over him, its teeth seemed to lengthen, growing before his eyes. And then the statement ends abruptly. A page is missing from the file.
The next page picks up mid-sentence, describing actions so horrific that they were redacted from the statement. But what we can glean from the remaining text is truly disturbing. Was compelled to commit acts of violence driven by a dark influence he could not resist.
He describes killing a small dog, wringing its neck until it snapped. He expresses remorse, acknowledging the horror of his actions, but also a strange sense of normalcy. It's as if the act itself, however monstrous, brought him some kind of twisted peace.
He goes on to say that he saw this figure everywhere. In his closet, at the foot of his bed, even staring at him from the rearview mirror. They would have conversations sometimes in strange languages that somehow understood. The figure shared secrets with him, promising him power and enlightenment if he would just do as instructed.
The doctors at the prison diagnosed with psychosis, but he refuted this, claiming that he was of sound mind when he committed the murder that landed him on death row.
He describes choosing his victim randomly at a bus stop, a man in a red jacket, engaging him in small talk before brutally attacking him with a hammer. He details the violence with a chilling detachment, noting the lack of satisfaction he felt afterward. It's as if the promised reward, the sense of power, never materialized.
Fields describes crying throughout his arrest trial and sentencing. He seemed resigned to his fate, accepting his death sentence as a just punishment for his crimes. But even in his final days, the figure continued to haunt him, appearing in his dreams, asking the same question over and over, "Are you ready to die now?"
After this statement was posted online, some Reddit users began digging into the details. One user was able to identify the prison where it was held based on the username of the person who shared the statement. Another user unearthed some leaked audio recordings of executions in Georgia from 2001.
In one of these recordings, something truly chilling occurs. At the 25.45 mark, just after the inmate refuses a last statement and a last prayer, an unidentified voice can be heard asking, "Are you ready to die now?"
The same question that haunted some's final days. And the chilling implication is that this figure, this entity, was somehow present at the execution. Some have speculated that it was simply a member of the execution team, perhaps someone whose name was redacted from the official transcript. But the tone of the voice, its proximity to the microphone, and the fact that it goes unanswered by the other officials present create a sense of unease.
Another Reddit user pointed out some creepy mumbling at 32.52 in the audio recording, further adding to the mystery. The discussion in the Reddit thread takes an even stranger turn as users begin discussing the concept of tulpas.
In Tibetan mysticism, a tulpa is a being or object created through sheer willpower visualization and focused attention, essentially a materialized thought form.
The suggestion is that this creature, this figure haunting death row inmates, could be a tulpa, a manifestation of their collective fear and guilt.
That's one theory. But there's another, even more disturbing possibility, that this creature feeds on those negative emotions growing stronger with each execution.
The filing clerk uncovered another document, even more disturbing than the last one. It's a handwritten account from an inmate, executed in the late 1990s. The details of his encounter with this creature take the horror to a whole new level.
This inmate describes being visited by the figure not in his dreams, but in his cell. He claims the creature would appear at night, slipping through the bars, as if it were smoke.
Slipping through the bars, that defies the laws of physics, suggests something supernatural beyond our understanding of reality.
Or perhaps a manifestation of the inmate's deteriorating mental state. We know prolonged isolation and stress. Death row can have profound psychological effects.
The details of this encounter, described by the inmate, so visceral, so disturbing, it's hard to dismiss it as delusion.
He claims the creature would crawl onto his bed, whisper in his ear, describing the ways in which he would die.
Whispering details of his execution, incredibly cruel.
It gets worse. The inmate claimed the creature would touch him, leaving behind a feeling of intense cold and the stench of decay.
Physical contact, a whole new dimension to this story.
And it seems the creature was fixated on the physical process of the execution. The inmate described the figure licking its lips as it spoke of the electric chair, the straps, the electrodes, as if the creature derived some sort of pleasure from the anticipation, the inmate's death.
A sadistic voyeur, perhaps even something more sinister. Could it be that this entity feeds on the energy, released at the moment of death?
That's a disturbing thought, but it would certainly explain the creature's presence. At the execution recorded in those leaked audio tapes, the mumbling at the 32.52 mark, perhaps that's the sound of the creature feeding.
We are talking about multiple inmates, executed over decades, describing encounters with the same terrifying figure.
Encounters that seem to escalate in intensity over time.
As if the creature is growing stronger, bolder with each execution. If that's the case, what does it mean for the future? What happens when its appetite grows?
The filing clerk, who discovered these documents, claims there were other boxes, filled with similar accounts, but they were too afraid to examine them. They left the job soon after, and have refused to speak publicly about their experience.
It seems we're only scratching the surface of this mystery. The question remains, what is this creature? A tulpa? A manifestation of collective fear and guilt? Or is it something more ancient, primal?
Perhaps the answer lies, not in the realm of the supernatural, but in the depths of the human psyche. Could it be that this creature is a projection of our own darkest impulses, our own fear of death and judgment?
Or could it be we have created this monster through our actions, our systems of punishment, our very belief in evil?
These are questions that we may never be able to answer, but they are questions that we must ask ourselves. For if we do not confront the darkness within us, it may consume us all. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That this creature might be real, existing beyond thought and fear.
It challenges everything. Our understanding of the world forces us to confront the possibility that there are things we just can't comprehend.
We've gone over those chilling accounts from the inmates, the consistency of their descriptions, and that unidentified voice in the execution recording. It's undeniable.
We've considered the possibility of a tulpa, that it's a being born of thought, But there's a malevolence to this entity. It seems to enjoy suffering and death. Suggests something more. Ancient. Primal.
It's like we're dealing with something that predates human consciousness. It's been lurking in the shadows since the beginning, feeding on our darkest impulses.
A shadow. With a foothold in our justice system, where fear and guilt are amplified, concentrated, makes you wonder what happens to those emotions. The energy released at death.
Where does it go?
Maybe it doesn't dissipate. Maybe it coalesces, drawn to a source, feeding something hungry.
Every execution, every act of violence, strengthening this creature, expanding its reach.
If that's true, it's a dark thought.
This story, these documents, they forced us to confront the darkness in ourselves, the shadows at the edges of our understanding. There are things in this world that defy explanation, forces we may never understand.